Hi, we've got Barbara Hemphill with Productive Environment Institute with us today as our podcast guest. In 1978, Barbara took out, this is something that had caught my eye, that she took out a $7 ad in New York City newspaper and advertised her professional organizing business. And she's been doing it to this day. So the first 20 years, she focused her business on paper and physical clutter for home, offices, and organizations. In today's digital and AI age, the same principles and expertise apply to help her clients with digital clutter and digital noise. So over 40 years, she has helped thousands of companies and become an icon and top expert in this industry. She's been featured on national media platforms such as Good Morning America, Today Show, and CNN Nightly News. She's written 7 books about taming clutter, and she's currently a contributing writer for Formidable Women magazine. Her company, Productive Environment Institute, is based in North Carolina, trains and certifies productivity experts around the world to help clients increase productivity without disorganization and overwhelm. And that pretty much sums it up. I'll just say her website's at www.productiveenvironment.com. Barbara, it's a pleasure to have you on Founders HQ podcast today. So
thank you, Alan. I'm always happy to have an opportunity to share what I feel so passionate about.
Yes, it exudes from your being. I think the place to start is kind of like maybe start from the beginning, just a brief, like, how'd you get into the field you're in? What inspired you? What were some things that stood out, especially maybe that transition when it became, more moving towards digital and the original paper content and so forth became a sort of a different model now. It wasn't the primary focus. So if you want to touch on that, that'd be great.
Well, let me just say, in spite of the fact that this is supposed to be the paperless age, we still have a lot of clients that have paper.
Good to know.
Because there's a lot of companies that have gone digital, but unfortunately they didn't make any decisions about the paper that existed before they went digital. And then even when they did go digital, they didn't do a good job of training people how to protect and save their digital information. And a lot of employees weren't really comfortable with it. They don't know if I can find it, if I put this on here or whatever. So a lot of people still, I just talked with an executive and said, I like my paper, so there's still paper too. But let's go back to the beginning. This started,
Sure.
with my first husband, I lived in India for 5 years. We adopted 3 orphan children, one with special needs, and moved to New York City. And my husband worked for a nonprofit and didn't make enough money to pay for living in New York City. So it's like, okay, I need to contribute to the family, but I want my children to be first. So I decided the best way to do that was to find a problem in the world that I could solve that people would pay me for. And that a way to do that would be to listen. So I took my children to the playground, and I would sit on the playground and I would just listen to conversations. And I began hearing conversations about overwhelm, about clutter, about disorganization, about time management. And I'd hear people say things about, we haven't filed the taxes because I don't have the receipts. Or, I haven't had company over because the dining room table's filed full of papers. Or we haven't parked our car in the garage. One of my first clients was an astrophysicist, and his garage was full of boxes of papers from research. And I thought, they didn't have my mother and my father. I mean, I grew up on a farm in Nebraska. Well, first of all, we use the acronym SYSTEM, saving you space, time, energy, and money. Every time you have to do something repeatedly, you need a system. Well, if you're a farmer, if you don't have a system, the crops aren't going to grow and the cows aren't going to give milk. And my mother was the assistant to an owner of a bank for 46 years. So I grew up with doing things in systems and thought everybody did. And then I began to realize that that wasn't true. I'm not naturally organized. I was diagnosed with ADHD. I'm a musician by training. I majored in music. And I like to start things. I don't like to finish things. I like the big picture, and I hate details. So that's right. The reason that my system has lasted all these years, and the reason I've been able to train other people to do it, is because they were meant for me. They were meant for disorganized me. If I didn't use my own systems, I don't know where I would be. So that's where it all started. And I focused on paper primarily for the first 10 years, I guess. And then we began to move into the digital age. And the business was based on four words. Clutter is postponed decisions. When you pick up a piece of paper, it's like, okay, do I keep this? How long do I keep this? Where do I keep this? How do I file this? What do I call this? Oh, I don't know. And you put it on the pile. And before you know it, you'll sit there with the pile. There was an old adage for years that said, handle a piece of paper only once. Well, that's
Yeah, I
ridiculous
remember that.
because,
Yeah.
yeah, it's ridiculous. And people thought that's what organized was. They thought organized was a place for everything and everything in its place. And they thought it was handle a piece of paper only once. And both of those are huge lies.
Wow.
Because if
Okay.
you put a pile of papers in the center and you say, okay, I'm going to handle it once, you do the first paper, the second, the third, the 10th, and then you get interrupted. And you never get to the bottom of the pile. And the bottom of the pile was the piece of paper that was the most important, and you just missed it. And the same
Mm.
thing's true. Then we moved to digital. It's like, wait a minute. It doesn't matter if that information is coming to you in paper format or digital format. It's the same decision-making process. So what we really teach is, first of all, decision making. So we say clutter is postponed decisions, but it's not enough to make a decision. You have to have a way to implement that decision, and that's where the system comes in.
Wonderful. Can you give an outline a little bit of you talking about a system? Because it's just for the listeners and so forth, just to get
Well,
understanding of what the system.
I'll give you the foundational thing that's
Yes.
so simple. Every piece of information can be categorized into two major categories: action or reference.
I like that.
So I
Write that
don't care
down.
whether it's a piece of paper that comes into the mailbox or whether it's an email that comes in your box, whether it's a voicemail message, whether it's a text message, whether it's a Slack message, whether it's a WhatsApp message. Every single piece of information that comes in is one of those two things. And my business partner and I have a new book coming out called SOAR to Success. And SOAR stands for systemize and organize into action and reference. And that's exactly what we're teaching.
I love that. This is, I mean, that's gonna, when's that book due out?
It'll be out in the first of the year, January.
Oh, wonderful. And it's called Soar to
SOAR to Success.
Success. Wonderful. Okay. And is that going to be like on Amazon
It's,
or
oh yeah, it'll be on Amazon. Yeah, and it's about
excellent.
organizing information. It's organizing
No,
the
I think it's
information
so, yeah, it's so needed everywhere, I think. So, I
personally
look
and
forward to that
professionally.
coming.
I mean,
Yes. Yes.
we are a world that is bombarded with information all the time.
When it first comes out, I'll be one of the people buying it for sure.
Very good,
So
very good.
thank you. That's great. Wow, there's just so much to talk about because of you have just such a huge body of work and experiences in life and so forth. But we talked about before the pre-podcast a little bit about this blog that you had that came out, and we talked about this Harvard study that revealed in 2025 the top two reasons people use AI are what? Therapy and
Number one is therapy and companionship,
hmm.
and number two is organizing my life.
Yeah.
And when I read that, I thought, I'm 78 years old, and people say to me, when are you going to retire? And I've been saying for the last 10 years, I'm refired. And I saw
Yeah.
this study, and it's like, this confirms why I'm refired, because that's exactly for 40 years, I've learned that organizing your life is about having companionship with your creator and yourself. That's the core of organizing. So when people call us and say, I want to get organized, the answer is, for what? What does organized mean? And we
Hmm.
call it the art. It's an art of organizing. There are no people say to me, what should I do? And when I say, that's the wrong question. The question is, what will you do?
Yeah. Wow. That's incredible. Yeah, it's I'm trying to catch a little bit about what you wrote. it's one of the things you said you want to. I think one of your motivations that to do this work, because I think at one time, I think you wrote somewhere that it's like you didn't have the financial, like in your marriage and your life and stuff like that. You could have chose not to work, but you chose this almost like as a mission or a purpose
Well,
that
it's my
is much
purpose.
greater
It,
than just
well, and it is my purpose. And
yeah.
here's the exciting part, Alan.
Hmm.
When people, when people know their purpose, organizing information gets infinitely better, but they've never seen the relationship. There is a relationship between how you organize your information and your purpose, but some people haven't really gotten that. So
Hmm.
when they work with us, they get that. But there are other people who are in some kind of transition. Maybe they've just been laid off, or maybe they're contemplating retirement, or maybe they've gotten divorced, or something. They're in a transition. Well, one of the things is that organizing your information helps reveals your purpose to you. Because you could
Hmm.
say, I don't know what I do want, but I know I don't want this. And so it's
Hmm.
like peeling the layers of an onion and you get to where it is that you want. And that's the reason I still do it. I believe God created us to accomplish our work and enjoy our lives. And if we're not, and work can be anything. I mean, work, it doesn't have to be paid work. It can be
Hmm.
volunteering or what, but you have to be doing something to make the world a better place. I mean, the reason the suicide rate is so high right now is there are too many people who don't know what they're here for.
Mm.
And so part of my passion for helping people is when you deal with people's clutter, you begin to see what's holding them back. In fact, I
Wow.
wrote a book, Less Clutter, More Life. And the premise is that physical and digital clutter is a symptom of emotional and spiritual clutter. I've seen it
Hmm.
over and over. And I learned that early on. In the very beginning, I worked with hoarders. I don't do that anymore. But now
Yeah.
the clients we have now are extraordinarily intelligent. They're creative, they're active, they're movers. They want to be the best of everything. They're really good. But I worked
Hmm.
with hoarders. And one
Yeah.
of the things I would find out was when they had trouble letting go, if I ask enough questions, I would always find out that there was a severe emotional loss in their life. And I was autographing books at Barnes and Noble in New York City, and I made that statement. And a young man came up to me and he said, my apartment is full of clutter. He said, it's mostly paper. He said, I haven't had anybody in it for months. He said, I come home at night and I start sorting. And he said, I sorted on my bed because it's the only flat surface. And he said, I literally become physically paralyzed when I pick up the pieces of paper. And then he looked at me and he said, my mother died when I was 6.
Mm.
Are you telling me I have to deal with the grief of losing my mother before I can manage my paper? I said, I can't answer that because I'm not a mental health professional. But
Yeah.
what I can tell you from my experience is that if you find someone you trust, most likely not a family member,
Hmm.
somebody who can help you decide what you need and want to keep. Clutter's postponed decisions, and it's yours. It's an art. It's not what somebody else wants, it's what you want.
Hmm.
You will solve your paper problem. Well, I was speaking to a group of 700 executive women at a university, and I told that story. A woman walked up with tears coming down her face, and she said, you just saved my marriage. I said, wow, that's pretty dramatic. Do you mind explaining? And she said, I came to this conference with the intention of going home and telling my husband, to whom I've been married 13 years, that I was leaving. Because she said, he's a pack rat and I have allergies and I just couldn't. And then she stopped and she said, I never realized until I heard you that it wasn't that he wouldn't let go, but he couldn't let go.
Mm.
His mother died
Big
when he was
distinction.
7.
Oh.
And
Yeah.
it's things, one time when we first moved to Raleigh 20 or 30 some years ago now, I used to do trade shows. And
Mm.
there was one gentleman there, he was in his late 50s, I would guess. And he'd always show up. He's kind of like a groupie. Every time I was there he
Yeah.
was. One day he said, my clutter started when I was 55, when I lost the job I loved and never found another one. There's another example. I've had women say past childbearing years. I've had people who, I mean, there's always emotion behind it. And part of
Mm.
the work that we do with people is uncovering what that feeling is that's making them hold on. And the story, the statement that we work for, that we hear hundreds of times is, this feels so much lighter.
Mm, I love that. No, it's great. I think yeah, your work borders like it seems like such a physical act or doing some action like you said or whatever, but there's so many other components to it all, like in terms of emotional and spiritual and all kinds of things that you don't necessarily always associate with clutter. And
Well,
when people don't
yesterday,
recognize.
a client said to me yesterday, "You're a physical coach."
Interesting.
She said, "You coach me, but you also do the work." So, in fact, one of my first clients was the vice president of a company in New York City. And he was sitting in his executive desk, and I was sitting beside him, and had piles of paper. And my job is to ask questions. It's not to make the decision, it's just to ask the questions. So I was sitting there asking the questions as he was sorting. And I have ADHD, so I like to be busy. So I opened up the drawer and I was sorting the paper clips while
Uh-huh.
I was asking the questions. And he looked at me and he said, "You're too expensive to be sorting paper clips." And I looked at him and said, "What I've learned is how you sort the paper clips is how you live your life."
Wow.
And it's
Okay,
true.
yeah, that's really interesting. Well, I mean, this is it's such a cool topic. I'm really glad we had this out. That we're getting to talk about it. Can I talk a little bit more about your business, like just in
Sure.
terms of the operation? You said you had a partner, you have a CEO, right now?
So
Or yes.
well, actually, so there's two companies. So there's a company called Productive Environment Institute, which is the company I founded.
Yeah.
But when I started in business, I took training from Sandler Sales Training. And the founder
Okay.
had been dead for 10 years, and we
Oh,
were listening to his audio cassette tapes. And I said,
interesting.
"That's my business model. I want to be dead 10 years and have people still listening to what I said."
I hope
So
longer. So
I
I'm getting
built
there.
a company to sell. And so I sold my company to one of the people that I trained. So now it's
Wow.
owned by Andrea Anderson. So she and I
Uh,
co-authored the book that's coming out, Sort of
yeah.
Success. It says by Andrea Anderson with Barbara Hemphill, because it's her. Taming the Paper Tiger launched my first business.
Mm-hmm.
And now Sort of Success is launching Productive Environment Institute with her at the head of the company. And so I'm still actively there. And then I have a company called Barbara Hemphill LLC, which is just me. I work with a very few executives. I do speaking engagements and pick a few things
Mm-hmm.
just to get out in the market and see what's going on and
Yeah.
meet people and connect people. And then Productive Environment Institute trains certified productive environment specialists. So we've trained
Mm-hmm.
hundreds of people. They're their own businesses. They pay us to be trained, to be
Yeah.
certified, and the right to use our intellectual property. And 80 to 90% of our work is done virtually. It used to be we went in, but there's so much shame and embarrassment about clutter and disorganization. And so now we can do it virtually. And a wonderful side effect that I hadn't anticipated is that people actually learn better when we're not there. Because if
Mm.
we're in there, we end up physically doing some of the stuff, but the client has to learn kinesthetically.
Yes.
You have to put the piece of
Mm-hmm.
paper in the file, you have to move the email into the folder or do whatever it is. And if we end up doing it. So it turned out to be one of those things that I fought it like crazy because I'm a person. It's like, oh, I want to be
Mm-hmm.
there. And Andrea drugged me into digital, and it was one of the best things, into virtual, and it was one of the best things
Yes.
that ever happened.
Well, that's great. And so now you have these two different things. So do you spend like 80% more on your enterprise, or do you have a
It's probably pretty
pretty
equal.
even?
It's,
50
yeah,
50.
probably
Okay.
even, probably 50-50.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And it sounds like you still are physically going out to corporations, companies.
Periodically, I take a few clients, not very
Yeah.
many, but I feel like I've always said it's important for me to have my
Oops.
earpod is going on.
No problem.
It's important for me to do it because things change.
Yeah.
And so I need to be there. So I pick a few clients that I want to take, and I try to pick clients from different industries and different
Mm-hmm.
situations so that I always know that what we're teaching is current.
Yeah.
And I love doing it, but that's the only way I can make sure, because in the information age, what you learned 6 months ago may be different now. And with AI, for example,
It's
one
moving
of the
fast.
huge things now is because everybody's using AI, it means they're generating information at a much faster rate.
Mm-hmm.
So if they don't have systems in place to collect that, and of course, with AI, if you ask AI the same thing twice, you're not going to get the same answer. So if you
Mm-hmm.
liked the answer the first time, you better be sure you know how to find it, because if you
Yeah.
ask the same question the next time, you're not going to get the same answer you got the first time.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, and one of the things that's critical about what we do that I think makes our work so powerful is it's based on today's mail is tomorrow's pile.
Mm.
Because what most people do when they try to organize their email or their files is like, okay, let's go clean out the old stuff first. But while you're cleaning out the old stuff, what's happening? The news coming
More
in.
stuff's coming.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, in a couple of weeks, we're doing one of the things that we do often. I do some pro bono work, and this is a case I'm doing it for a nonprofit, and we're doing a digital productivity party.
Can you extrapolate on
It, it's a
that?
one day training event.
Mm-hmm.
It starts the day with me doing a seminar called Sometimes It Takes an Expert to Take Out the Trash. And it's
Okay.
helping people decide how to make decisions, because people have never, I mean, employees don't get taught that. And if they're not naturally organized, and it's something that has to be done with management and employees, because management can't decide what to keep because they don't know what the employees need in order to do the work. But employees don't, they're not willing to let go of things because they're afraid if they let go, management might want it. So
Mm-hmm.
this is a day when everybody, as my mother used to say, many hands make light work. So we start the day with a seminar and bagels and coffee and talk about that. And then we begin organizing. We do two kinds. One we do is physical, where they actually do the paper and the clutter, and then other is digital. And we work with digital. We address what we call the 7 information management questions. Research
Mm.
shows that for every 5 employees a company hires, only 4 are doing what they're paid to do, because the 5th one is looking for something in order to do what they're supposed to be doing. Now, here's an interesting thing from marketing. When I first came across that idea, I thought, oh, this is so exciting because people are going to want me. Well, what management began thinking is, oh, that means I have to fire somebody. No, it doesn't mean you have to fire somebody. It means that somebody who was looking for something can now be serving a customer, or they can be creating a new product, or they can build a new relationship. It doesn't mean you fire somebody. It means you increase your productivity. And interestingly enough, our tagline for Productive Environment Institute is accomplish your work and enjoy your life. Literally, about 10 years ago, somebody was hiring me to do a speaking and presentation. And he said, I just want them to do their work. I don't care if they enjoy their life. And now, since COVID,
Yeah.
management needs to be concerned about people enjoying their lives, because it's a
Mm-hmm.
matter of employee attraction and retention. If they are not
Absolutely.
also enjoying their life in addition to accomplishing their work, they're not going to stay.
Absolutely. You mentioned there were 7.
7 information management questions. So when an employee can't find something, it's
Okay.
because they haven't answered those 7 questions. What information do we need to keep? In what form? For how long? Who's responsible for filing it? Who needs access to it? How do we find it? And how's it backed up? And every time somebody can't find information, it's because one of those 7 hasn't been addressed. So when we do our digital productivity party, we will break into teams by department, and the team will address that to create the new systems. And then
Mm.
in this case, with the client that I'm getting ready to work with, they're actually declaring digital bankruptcy, and they have put in what
Mm.
they're calling a digital closet. They're putting all the old stuff in the closet, and they're implementing today's mail is tomorrow's pile, and they're starting over.
Starting fresh.
They can go back and get it. It's not being destroyed.
Yeah.
I mean, no, it's just being
But
so they can go back.
it's filed away digitally somewhere, and they
Exactly.
can access it if they need it.
And
But
then if they have to, and then when they have to have it, they use the new, like we'll work on naming. I mean, naming conventions are huge.
mhm.
If there
Yeah,
isn't a systemized way for the way we name files, we're going to have a problem.
that's an interesting topic. I never thought about that naming of yeah, files, etc. It seems obvious, but it can make a difference if you just randomly, file and then a
Well,
couple
even
months
the
later,
date. I mean, how do you do the date? Do you do it
yeah,
year, month, or day, or do you do it month, day? And are you doing dashes, or are you doing periods, or what are you doing? And
yeah,
everybody needs to do it the same, and nobody ever does that. My daddy was a
wonderful.
farmer in Nebraska, and he used to. It seems like common sense, right? In fact, I used to feel
Yeah.
guilty charging people because I think this is common sense, and my daddy used to say, "Common sense is not always so common."
No, no. I think your upbringing, it just like it set you up perfectly for what you're doing. It's just
Oh, for
in a
sure.
way because most people haven't had that experience, right? And then they come into the world, they don't ever really get trained on anything regarding systems or
Absolutely true. That is
so
that. I
it's
mean, I
wonderful
was,
what you're doing. Yeah,
yeah.
it's interesting. Well, I think I guess my last kind of questions would be along the lines of where do you see yourself going in the future, the company going, and so forth? I know you've transitioned a bit, and it's like, but you have two businesses
Well, I'll
going, or
tell
maybe
you,
it's even more. I don't know.
well, one of the dreams I have, I've done this a few times. I believe, and we talked about this before we did the interview, and I want to bring it
Hmm.
up again because I think it's
Please,
significant. When
please
I
do.
started 40 years ago, and I'm in Raleigh, North Carolina now, but I was in New York in the beginning, and then I was in Washington, D.C. for about 15 years. And in the early days, every executive had a private secretary, and every department had a file clerk. Every company had a file room and a records manager. I always called her Mabel, and they had
Mhm.
records retention. And the decision making mechanism that was in place was when the executive was finished with the file, it was usually he back in those days would
Mhm.
give it to the private secretary who sorted it or purged it, whatever, gave it to the file clerk. It would stay in the file clerk for like in the office for probably 3 years. She would walk it down to Mabel would keep it in the file room for 3 years, and then it would either be sent off to Iron Mountain or shred or put away. That was the way decisions were made.
Or, yeah.
Well, granted, there was too much. I can remember file clerks trying to look busy because they really didn't have
Mhm.
enough to do. Well, as happens so often, the pendulum swung too far. And so suddenly, and I just talked with an executive of a big company last week, and she said, I talk with my friends, and we've been in the corporate world for 20 years. And she said, we have two full-time jobs now. One job is to be the executive, and the other job is to be the assistant. It's a classic case of where the pendulum swung too far.
Mhm.
And
And a
so
lot of
I
times they may not
believe,
even have the skills of. They're great executives, but they're not good assistants
guaranteed,
themselves, right?
absolutely guaranteed that's true. So my dream is that companies will train people within the company to do that, to train. And I've
Wonderful.
actually created a certification that a company can be certified as a productive environment where everyone can accomplish their work and enjoy their lives.
Wonderful.
And I think
That's
that's a good employee retention, attraction and retention. It's like, well, everybody
yes.
wants to work at a place. And let's face it, if everybody's enjoying their life, they're going to have more loyalty to the company. People leave not because of money most of the time. They leave because of their management. They leave because they don't like their job. That's what it's about. So I had one company, for
Mhm.
example, that had about 120 employees. So I was there for 2 years as a consultant. And during that time, I trained three people to do what I did. So they had their own internal productive environment specialists. So that's where I would like this to go. I think
That's
that
wonderful.
the idea of companies having productive environment specialists within the company, and we can train them now because I've trained the trainer and I have these trainers all over the world and we can train it. That's where I want it to go.
Oh, that sounds what a great vision, and and to really spread your very practical and sort of like foundational um, requirements in business and in life, just to be organized, to have less clutter, to feel lighter, to be happier, and enjoy our lives. So,
Well, I tell executives, if you do this, it will increase profit, productivity, and peace of mind.
and they love all that.
Yeah.
All three matter.
All three.
Yeah.
We all three want all, and that's what it will do. I mean, when getting rid of the clutter and putting systems in place will do all three of those hands down.
Excellent. Well, it's been a great pleasure for me, and I think for our audience. And so I am so glad to meet Barbara, and wish you the very best. And I can't wait to go to the Amazon bookstore and order that book.
Well,
that
thank
you're
you
coming out
very
with.
much. It should be there in January, so,
I'll look for it. Thank you.
all right.
I'm gonna
Thank you.
yeah.